Welcome to this explainer. Okay, so if you're stepping into the world of research, you've definitely encountered the term review of literature, or the ROL. Now, for a lot of us, just seeing those words on a syllabus is enough to induce a sudden, mild panic attack. It sounds like endless, tedious reading of dusty old papers, right? But I want to completely reframe that for you today. I want you to think of the review of literature not as a chore, but as the architect's blueprint for constructing a great house of research. You wouldn't just go out and build a stunning new mansion without first understanding the terrain and laying down a rock-solid foundation, would you? Well, the ROL is exactly that. It's your map through this vast landscape of existing knowledge, and it actually helps you find your way toward totally new discoveries. So today we are going to master this blueprint together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the research foundation. Second, sourcing your building materials. Third, types of literature reviews. Fourth, the 4Cs strategy. And finally, number 5, the step-by-step process.
So, starting right off with part 1, the research foundation.
To really understand its purpose, we first need to tackle a pretty fundamental question. How is a literature review actually different from an academic research paper? It's honestly a super common point of confusion. So while the main focus of an academic research paper is to develop a completely new argument or a new finding, that research paper will actually contain the literature review as just one of its chapters. The RL's job isn't to present new primary data at all. Its job is to summarize and synthesize the arguments, the past findings, and the historical context to support your new ideas. It's essentially the groundwork that proves your new house actually belongs in this academic neighborhood.
So the crucial point is that a carefully constructed ROL serves several massive purposes for your project. First off, it synthesizes and organizes just a vast amount of existing information into a readable, easily digestible capsule. Second, it helps you identify the practically important variables for your own study, so you don't miss anything critical. Third, and honestly, this is a really big one, it prevents you from reinventing the wheel. It avoids repetition and duplication, unless, of course, you're intentionally trying to test the validity of an earlier study. And finally, a great literature review argues the relevance of your specific question, and it immediately establishes your credibility. It proves to the reader that, hey, you are a knowledgeable and capable researcher who has actually done their homework.
Moving on to part 2, sourcing your building materials.
We'll start with a kind of unique term you might run into, which is gray literature. This basically refers to non-peer-reviewed sources. We're talking about things like conference papers, government reports, and unpublished documents. Now, while they haven't gone through that traditional academic publishing mill, they are incredibly valuable. They often contain the absolute most current on-the-ground data, highly niche insights, or even preliminary findings that just haven't made it into official journals yet. So gray literature actually provides fantastic, raw building blocks for your study.
Now, what's really interesting about this is looking at massive academic databases. Take a repository like Shodhganga, for instance, which recently highlighted a milestone of over 500,000 theses. University libraries and online dissertation repositories like this are incredible because they house doctoral documents that contain deep, highly detailed analysis of existing research. Because these documents already include their own extensive literature reviews and methodology sections, they are an absolute goldmine when you're trying to figure out what prior scholars have already done in your exact field.
Beyond gray literature and repositories, you obviously have your primary materials. Books, for example, are totally essential for that foundational, historical, and theoretical understanding. Then you have reports, whether they're annual, technical, or industry-specific, and these give you real-world data and trends. To actually track down academic papers, you're going to use heavily indexed databases, places like Scopus, Web of Science, or the UGC Care List, just to make sure everything is perfectly credible. But what is the absolute gold standard? Academic journals. Journals like Nature, The Lancet, or Harvard Business Review are peer-reviewed, which means other experts have rigorously evaluated them. And because they're published so frequently, they're going to offer you the most timely, up-to-date, and highly specialized niche research out there.
That brings us to part 3, types of literature reviews.
Now, there are several different types out there, but let's draw a really clear comparison between the two most prominent ones. That's the narrative literature review versus the systematic literature review. A narrative review is kind of what most people think of. It provides a comprehensive summary of existing literature, offering great insights into key concepts without being strictly bound to a rigid methodology. It's absolutely excellent for broad overviews. In stark contrast to that, a systematic review uses a highly structured, transparent, and fully replicable methodology to select and analyze studies. Its main goal is to eliminate bias and ensure a perfectly balanced synthesis of knowledge. Choosing between the two? Well, that depends entirely on how rigid and exhaustive your specific research question requires you to be. All right, part 4, the 4 C's strategy. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how you construct your review. The 4 C's are your mortar. First, you cite. You acknowledge sources to credit original authors, and this acts as the basis for your new arguments. Second, you contrast. This is where you highlight where studies actually disagree with each other or where their methods diverge. Third, you compare. You identify those similarities in recurring themes across totally different papers to show where the academic consensus is. And finally, you connect. You link all of this past literature directly back to your specific hypothesis. For example, you wouldn't just list a study by Smith. You'd say something like, building on the work of Smith, this study explores how specific social media platforms uniquely impact anxiety. That connection, that is exactly where the magic happens.
Which brings us to our final section, part 5, the step-by-step process.
Let's move to and see how this actually builds. Here are the first 5 crucial preparation phases. Step 1 is defining the scope. You have to set boundaries, like timeframes and source types, just so you don't get completely overwhelmed. Step 2 is searching for relevant literature, utilizing those powerful databases we talked about earlier. Step 3 involves evaluating those sources for credibility. Step 4 is organizing and summarizing. And here's a pro tip. This is where you want to group sources by themes or methods, rather than just listing them chronologically. Which leads to Step 5, identifying themes and patterns. Grouping sources by these shared themes makes your narrative incredibly clear because it reveals exactly where the consensus lies, and more importantly, where the glaring research gaps are.
Finally, we reach steps 6 and 7, actually writing the review. This is where we put the roof on the house. Your introduction hooks the reader right away by highlighting those gaps in current knowledge. The body is where you deploy those 4 C's we learned, analyzing and connecting ideas based on the themes you found. Now, crucially, you must include a critical analysis section. This isn't just about reporting what others said. This is where you evaluate the strengths, the weaknesses, and the potential biases of past studies. You emphasize the flaws or gaps in previous work to justify exactly why your own research is necessary. And lastly, your conclusion neatly summarizes the main arguments and firmly connects the entire review to your upcoming methodology chapter.
And there you have it. The review of literature is honestly no longer this daunting, endless reading assignment. It is a highly powerful, strategic process of synthesizing existing information, identifying vital research gaps, and establishing your credibility in the field. By utilizing strong sources, applying those 4 C's, cite, contrast, compare, and connect, and following a structured step-by-step writing process, you are laying a completely unshakable foundation. You have the architect's blueprint. You know exactly where to source the finest materials, so the only question left for you is, what new knowledge will you build? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, happy researching!